Okay, Tom, I believe we're
Good to
live.
go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the April 13th, 2021 meeting of the Dunn County Planning Resource and Development Committee and Land Conservation Committee. We'll have a public hearing today and then our regular agended meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order. And I can see from our screen, the secretary can record that all members of the committee are present. And with that, I will move, since it was agended for 8:30, I'll move and announce for 8:30. I'll move directly to open the public hearing. And this is a hearing on the final draft of the Land Division Condominium and Survey Regulations Ordinance revisions that we've been working on for the last several months, number of months. So with that, we are now in a public hearing. And again, I can see from the screen a note for the secretary to note that all members of the committee are present. The hearing is intended to take public testimony about the proposed ordinance revision, and this will be the only opportunity really for public comments on this ordinance. If we have public comment, only one person will speak at a time, and we'll recognize them over the Zoom. Each person will need to get sworn in, state their name and address, and address their comments directly to the committee. We'll then confirm that this is a legally noticed open meeting and with proper public notice. We'll have a report from staff about the ordinance proposal. We'll hear any public comments that may have come in or are present today on the call. We'll ask for any questions or any comments from the committee and staff, and then we'll close the public portion of the hearing and move to deliberation and action as a separate agenda item back in open session. So that's how it's gonna work. So I'll start with a request from staff to confirm that open meeting and public notice requirements have been met.
Thank you, Chair Quinn. So the legal notice for this public hearing, I required a class 2 notice in the paper. It was published on Wednesday, March 24th in the Dunn County News, and again a week later on Wednesday, March 31st. So we met the class 2 public notice requirements according to statute. I will now read in the notice of public hearing. March 10th, 2021, State of Wisconsin, County of Dunn. To all whom it may concern, in accordance with section 236.454 of the Wisconsin statutes, public notice is hereby given to all residents in Dunn County that the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee will hold a public hearing on a proposed land division, condominium, and surveying regulations ordinance final draft on April 13th, 2021 at 8:30 a.m. by teleconference due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Instructions on providing comments during the public hearing will be included on the publicly noticed Planning, Resource and Development Committee meeting agenda. A copy of the proposed ordinance is available for public inspection by appointment at the Dunn County Surveyor's Office, 3001 US Highway 12 East, Suite 240A, Menominee, Wisconsin, 54751. Contact Tom Carlson, Dunn County Surveyor, at 715-231-6526 with questions to schedule an appointment to review the ordinance or to obtain copies of the ordinance. A copy of the proposed ordinance is also available for public inspection on the Dunn County webpage. This is the only opportunity to address the committee regarding this proposed ordinance. All interested persons are invited to participate in said hearing and be heard. I would also like to note that a copy of the draft ordinance, of course, a copy of the ordinance was posted to the website. That happened on March 22nd. I also emailed out a copy of the public hearing and a copy of the draft ordinance on that same day, March 22nd, to 35 of the surveyors that are on a distribution list I have. They do work in this county, so they were all notified. On March 22nd, same day, I also sent that same notice, public hearing notice and the draft ordinance to all the town clerks within Dunn County. So there's 22 different townships. And then on March 24th, I sent out the public notice and the draft ordinance copy to realtors and title companies that serve the area. There were 41 professionals on that list. So when you add all those together, in addition to the notice in the paper, there were 98 people that were notified in addition to the paper. So try to do our due diligence, making as many people aware of this draft ordinance as possible. So that concludes this portion. Tom?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. The next section would be back to you, Mr. Carlson, request staff report to review the ordinance for us.
Okay, thank you. I just want to start off by saying that our current land division ordinance was adopted on March 22nd, 2006, and was certainly in need of some updates. County staff and this committee have been meeting formally to discuss this ordinance since about July of last year. So it's been quite a while. We've made a lot of progress on it. Many portions of our existing ordinance either have remained in place or have been revised to some degree in our draft ordinance. We have also introduced entirely new sections and concepts into the draft. I would like now to briefly summarize the draft ordinance that we have before us today. We have expanded the purpose section to provide greater protection for environmentally sensitive areas. Our definitions section has been greatly expanded to include new terms such as contiguous buildable area, contiguous tract, dry land access, environmentally sensitive areas, high water elevation, lowest building opening, and wetlands. We have better defined the types of land divisions governed by this ordinance and provided more clarity with respect to parcel combinations, reconfigurations, and retracement CSMs. We've also increased the number of lots one can create by CSM in a 5-year period from 4 to 5. We've provided better clarity on what we consider to be high value agricultural land. We've added more technical standards for certified survey maps and both preliminary and final plats, including the requirement for soil borings on all major land divisions. We've added some entirely new sections to the ordinance, such as 16.075 maximum residential density, 16.13 abrogation and greater restrictions, 16.16 non-liability, and 16.40 surveying requirements and general provisions. We've greatly expanded our surface drainage and erosion control section, which will provide more protection for our environmentally sensitive areas in the county. We've greatly expanded the streets and road section to include standards for cul-de-sacs and private roads with the requirement for maintenance agreements and a minimum width of 66 feet. We have also greatly expanded the lot section to address items such as lot area, length to width ratios, minimum frontage, non-conforming structures, and contiguous buildable area. We've also expanded the variance, appeals, and enforcement section of the ordinance to provide better clarity. And lastly, we've removed the fee schedule from our ordinance and we'll be placing it in an appendix, which will make revisions to the schedule much more simple and efficient. So that's a general summary, I guess, of the draft that we have before us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. So now is the opportunity for public comment. Do we, Tom and Randy, do we have any people who wanted to testify online?
I will let Randy answer the question about online testimony. I don't have access to that.
Okay, Randy, is there anyone who requested that?
No, there was only the one public comment, which was forwarded to Tom.
Okay. And just to clarify, the public comment we received yesterday was not regarding the public hearing. So that will be read when we are back in our regular meeting. I did receive, however, a public comment last December 17th. You may recall we had this hearing today was scheduled last December 22nd, and then it got canceled. There was a written public comment received at that time from the HEAT group, the Healthy Environmental Action Team. of Dunn County. I have communicated with one of the co-chairs, Cheryl Miller, from this committee 2 days ago, and just confirmed that they still wanted these comments read. They were archived. Our ordinance has been modified slightly since last December, and the direction I got from Cheryl was, yes, please read these comments into the record. So I will do that at this time. This correspondence was received December 17th, 2020 from the HEAT group, which is the Healthy Environmental Action Team, Health Done Right Coalition of Menominee. So this is addressed to the PR&D committee. Dear committee members, on December 9th, our Dunn County Healthy Environment Action Team, HEAT, met with Tom Carlson, and he provided us with a thorough overview of the proposed land division ordinance changes. HEAT strongly supports the adoption of the proposed land division ordinance as presented in draft form to your committee. Our action team, a diverse group of citizens convened in response to health needs identified by the Dunn County Health Department, has met monthly for more than a year to address environmental health concerns identified by the department. Our mission is to support transition to healthy urban and rural land and water use practices and policies to ensure Dunn County has safe air and water quality and ecological resilience. The proposed land division ordinance includes critical standards and definitions that clarify requirements for developers, landowners, neighbors, and local government. If adopted, the ordinance will provide the specifics needed by all parties in the land subdivision process as we work together toward development that protects our environment. Please support the proposed land division ordinance as a committee and advocate for its adoption by the full Dunn County Board. Sincerely, Healthy Environmental Action Team, Steve Hogseth and Cheryl Miller, co-chairs. So that concludes the written public comment that we received regarding the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Let's see. So that's all the public comment we have. Now I'd ask if the committee, after all this time, has any comments or questions they would like at this point in time they would like to have. So then we'll close the public hearing.
Tom,
Yep,
could I please interrupt? Sure. I do have some staff comments that I would like to make, and I think would be appropriate at this time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tom. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as I was reading through this draft for one more time in the last week or so, a couple of minor things came up. Corp Council and I met last Friday to go over one of these, and I have this here before you. It's section 16.06. So it's the land divisions governed by this chapter. As I was reading through here, item 1C caught my eye, and it's something I personally had intended to make some revisions at our last committee meeting when this ordinance was discussed, and I take full responsibility for it. I overlooked it. So what this section talks about is conveyances of land between adjoining property owners if additional lots are not thereby created. So this is an exemption from the requirements of our ordinance. And we have in here any fractional part of a lot or all lot intended to be conveyed to an adjoining landowner, which is correct. But there's one more element to all this, and that's if an owner of a certified survey map is going to be deeded some land from a neighbor who does not have a certified survey map, that also is creating a new lot. And it's just a simple oversight. So we're not really adding a whole new concept here. We're just adding some more verbiage to an existing sentence. So the sentence that I guess I'm recommending, Corp Council and I are advocating for this recommended change here. So it should read in our minds, for the purpose of this subsection, any fractional part of a lot or all lot intended to be conveyed to an adjoining landowner, or any parcel of land that is not part of a lot or all lot intended to be conveyed to an owner of an existing lot or outlot, shall be considered to be an additional lot. Does anybody have questions on this? Need more clarification? It's just the other side of the coin, if you will, so to speak. When it involves conveyance between adjoiners, and it's certainly needed when we're dealing with certified survey maps. New parcels are being created. And if we don't have this in here, it provides a loophole. So any questions on that? I would strongly recommend that we put this in to the draft that would go to county board.
Any questions? Okay.
And then there's one other item. And again, this is a really good ordinance. Every time I read through it, I'm really impressed by what's in here. It's really a good work product, and if this is adopted at some point, I'm going to be very comfortable using it. So there's a section in here. It's section 16.21, and this also caught my eye, and I take full responsibility for not catching this earlier. So 16.21 is our certified survey map section, talks about standards, and then sub 4 in here, it says the certified survey map shall show correctly on the face of the map the following information. The very last item here is our approval block. So all certified survey maps, need approval here by the county. And I sign all of them because, at a minimum, because they have to comply with the county land division ordinance, but the county zoning administrator, Bob Colson, also signs most of our certified survey maps because, they are subject to zoning, or if they're in an unzoned township, they're still possibly subject to shoreland zoning. So the way we have this worded here is all certified survey maps need the following signature blocks on in the following form. And we've got both blocks, one for the planning and zoning office, one for the surveyor's office. Well, if a certified survey map comes in an unzoned township that is not subject to shoreland zoning, the zoning administrator has not been signing those certified survey maps, and rightfully so. I mean, signing a certified survey map that has no zoning involved with it would be, I guess, analogous to having our county health director sign the certified survey map, or our child support director. I mean, they're signing it, but what does that signature really signify? So in my mind, this section really needs just some basic minor modification. I attempted to do that here. So this is what I'm recommending, that item 16.24 sub 4, item Q, an approval signature block for the county surveyor's office and for the county zoning office when applicable in the following form. So it's just some minor verbiage change in that sentence that would make things consistent with how we're conducting business today. The zoning office will only sign when applicable. So those are the two changes I'm recommending. Are there any questions, I guess, on the second change? It's just a minor housekeeping item, but I think it certainly would benefit from some revised verbiage there. Otherwise, the zoning office is going to be required to sign all these certified survey maps, which again isn't how we're doing business and not how we want to conduct business going forward. So with that concludes the comments I would like to make on the draft.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor
Yes.
Kinnear here.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson, as I read that, it's just, yeah, that's great, but it almost looks like when applicable for either one, when applicable for the surveyor or for the one, just the way it's written. Looking at it as someone sitting outside the county surveyor's office, or when applicable for the county zoning office.
Yeah, if we reversed the language, I think it would make it a little more clear. Put the when applicable before the zoning office.
I concur.
Good suggestion. Thanks, Mike. Any other questions? Anyone on the committee wish to make a comment to be included in the public record? Now's the time. Okay, then we will close the public portion of the hearing and move to deliberation and discussion of the committee's position on the ordinance revision. Let's start with a motion to approve, if that's possible, so we can get discussion going.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would like to move approval of the land division condominium and surveying regulations ordinance.
thank you Supervisor Morehouse. Is there a second?
Really?
Supervisor Bjork, seconds.
Thank you Supervisor York.
Would
We have
that
a
be?
motion and a second. Now we can have discussion. Go ahead,
Okay.
Gary.
It would be appropriate then to add in the verbiage that the county surveyor like mentioned now,
Yeah.
or
Why don't we have the motion, if it's okay with the maker, just say that we approve the ordinance revision as with the changes proposed at the hearing today.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I have no problem with that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. This has really been an interesting process to go through this discussion about this important policy. With that, if there's no further comment, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So let the record show that all 4 members of the committee voted in the affirmative. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'll just inform the committee members. What you have in your packet is just the text of the proposed ordinance. When this comes to the county board, there will be stapled to the front of it or on the front of it, there will be another ordinance that's the action that you will take in adopting this. So it'll say the county board of supervisors ordains as follows. The attached proposed land division ordinance is adopted and made a part of the code of ordinances as chapter, 16. And so I just wanted to let you know that, so that because you'll see a slightly different front page on it the next time you see this.
Okay, very good. Well done. And I think we all send a deep appreciation to corporate counsel and Mr. Carlson. Thank you for a well done job. And Nick, I got to say that it was difficult voting for you in the election, but I hated it because you'd be a good judge. But I hated the thought of losing this corporate counsel, because this has been, your expertise here has been really helpful, and your diligence also.
Thanks.
Okay, then we'll get back to our regular agenda. We're back in general session to our regular agenda. We already had the call the roll. We'll go back to approval of the minutes from March 23rd. Is there a motion to approve?
Supervisor Kinnear moves to approve minutes.
Supervisor Kinnear, is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork?
Anderson.
Supervisor Anderson. Any questions, corrections, additions? All in favor of approval, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. And we do have a public comment. Mr. Carlson, do you want to read that?
Yes, I can do that. Okay, so this public comment came in by email on Monday, April 12th at 5:37 p.m. It was from Catherine Stahl. The Lower Chippewa Invasives Partnership will be holding its second annual citizen monitoring training for citizens within Dunn County and other neighboring counties. Our mission is to have local citizens identify troublesome invasive plants and areas rich with native plants along the county roadsides. The information will then be shared with relevant municipalities. We recognize that road management crews do not have the time to do such monitoring. Our hope is citizens can provide information about invasives location, as well as special native plant locations. LSIP staff can collate the information for each municipality and then share the location and information about how to strategically control the troublesome invasive plants and where particularly native plant-rich areas need to be protected. We would greatly appreciate your sharing this monitoring opportunity with citizens in your districts. It is a great opportunity for citizens to become more aware of the best and the worst of the plants around them. The basic training will be virtual on May 4th and will follow up outdoors identification experience on either May 6th or 8th. The outdoors experience will be a small group format to provide safe distancing. Attached is a flyer with information about the training and contact information. For more information, contact Chris Gatsky at 715-539-2766. Thank you, Kathy Stahl. And here is a copy of the flyer that she has attached. Just leave it on the screen here for a short time so everybody can see it. It says the class size is limited to 20, so you want to reserve your spot today. So again, that's May 4th, 1 to 3:30 on Zoom, and then some infield training on May 6th, 1 to 4 p.m. or on May 8th and 9, or on May 8th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that would conclude the public comment that we received for today's meeting.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Carlson. Let's see, then our next item is staff reports, beginning with the Register of Deeds monthly report. Anyone have any questions for Heather about the report? Or Heather, you have anything you want to draw our attention to? Okay. Environmental Services Department, division reports, starting with Planning, Research and Development, starting with Tom Carlson. Any questions? Tom, you have any comments?
Nope, not
Okay.
at this time.
All right, okay. Land and Water Conservation. Any questions? Any comments, Chase?
I would just make one comment regarding the Land and Water Resource Management Plan that we presented last week. It was accepted by the Land and Water Conservation Board and was well received, I thought, with good dialogue and conversation. And so we're good for another 5 years, 5 years for our rest of our plan.
Okay. Solid waste and recycling. Is Morgan on today?
He is out at the transfer station
Okay.
conducting business there. He said if the committee had any questions, they could certainly email him and he would respond after.
Okay. So we'll leave it up to individual supervisors to email Morgan if they have questions about that. And Planning and Zoning. And Mr. Colson is on the beach in Florida. I talked to him yesterday. He was about to enter a cigar shop to buy some freshly rolled cigars. So he's not missing us at all. Any questions about the Planning and Zoning report? Okay. Then next, I think that's it, right? Next, we're back to Mr. Cummings, the review of draft agriculture performance standards on manure storage and management ordinance. Chase, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. The last time that this was before you was February 23rd committee meeting. And at that time, I presented the review that I conducted with Corporation Counsel and any revisions that were made to this ordinance that has been presented to you several times. I think there was a public hearing before back in January prior to the end of the year, back in December or November. And with the onboarding of myself and continued review of this product, we had a few more additions and changes and review of it. I did intend to bring this back before a public hearing prior to today's schedule, but I needed to review it with staff and spend a little more time on it. So today, I'd like to just present some of those revisions since the last time this was presented to you on February 23rd. And with the intention that with your approval, this would go before a second public hearing at a later date here, ideally the May 11th PR&D and Land Conservation Committee meeting, requiring that Class 2 notice. So with that, I'll just request, Tom, if you wouldn't mind kind of scrolling down through here, I'll call out a few line items just to make sure that I address some of the bulk of the revisions that we conducted. So if you would head to lines 49 and 50, this ordinance includes two new definitions for agricultural facility and agricultural practice. Those terms are used in this draft ordinance several times, and it was probably necessary that we included those in the definition section in order to provide the clearest interpretation of the ordinance. Down to line 66, please. Cropland practice was added for the same reason, just for clarity within the use of that term in the document. Line 98. Line 98 is land application. This definition was revised to be a little bit more clear as to what land application we are referring to. The previous definition was a little bit confusing as to what was included as part of land application, and this clarifies it by stating a process where manure is placed, spread, or applied to cropland or pasture land. The prior definition may have provided an opportunity or an instance where misinterpretation of land application could involve other practices associated with land applying manure. And for example, drag lines of liquid manure, and we do not necessarily have the authority to regulate those particularly types of systems at this time, as well as there are not specific standards that follow the drag lines themselves. However, land application of liquid manure does fall within the nutrient management planning practices within the ordinance. Line 110 would be livestock facility. This was added and just provide better clarification within the ordinance. And then what you find has been removed from this document is two definitions. One formerly known as the malfunctioning manure storage facility, and the second one being the mismanaged manure storage facility. And if you would scroll down to, we'll keep it there for now. I'll bring that topic up again later in my conversation with you, but primarily those two definitions were removed based on the recommendation from DATCAP, Department of Ag, as there is a provision within NR 151 code, as well as within this proposed ordinance, that would address those two items known as existing facilities. And I'll cover that a little bit more here in a minute. Tom, if you wouldn't mind going to line 261. So line 261, many of the terms that were used in the past were animal waste storage facilities, and they're in the previous versions of this ordinance, we were using interchangeably animal waste storage and manure storage facility. However, we did not have a definition for animal waste storage, but we do have a definition for manure storage facility. So there has been several, just some cleanup, some housekeeping with some of the terminology to make sure we're consistent with what is provided in definition. Line 269. Here is a was part of a public comment that had been received at a previous public hearing meeting. And this sentence here, basically starting on 269, removed upon order of the division, which shall include cleanup. Prior versions of the ordinance said which may include cleanup. So that has been changed to shall. Also, between line 272 and 273, previously talked about removal of malfunctioning and mismanaged storage facilities. Again, those terms have been removed. And again, I'll get to the reasoning behind that and where that's addressed. Line 278, the performance standards and prohibitions. So any person who stores manure or owns or operates a cropland practice or livestock operation in Dunn County is subject to the performance standards and prohibitions in this section of this ordinance. So there's a few terms in there, the or owns and a cropland practice or livestock operation. Those terms were added in that section just to provide clarification that the performance standards within this ordinance do apply to all agricultural practices in the county. While this ordinance previously was the current version of this ordinance that is effective in the county is strictly related to manure storage facilities. This new ordinance, by adoption of these performance standards, would apply to agricultural facilities in the county, whether or not there is manure associated with that operation. So this helps clarify some of that. Tom, if you'd go to line 332, please. So line 332, letter H, each year prior to April 1st, an updated nutrient management plan and checklist shall be submitted to the division covering all cropland receiving manure from all manure storage facilities constructed after October 1, 2002. This section, with Corporation Council and I, we met here a week or so ago to go through this one more time. And I believe we discussed this and may have been an oversight on my part that we did not necessarily clean this language up. So we may need to revisit that. Back to my previous comment about this ordinance applying to all agricultural practices or facilities within the county. These performance standards, specifically the nutrient management planning performance standard, really does, it's the intention that this would apply to all cropland and pastureland receiving nutrients. So we may need to do some cleanup on that sentence there. And my suggestion would be that a plan and checklist shall be submitted to the division by all producers covering all cropland and pastureland receiving nutrients, period, and strike out the October 1st date and receiving manure from all manure storage facilities. That just helps clarify that, these performance standards, again, are applicable to all agricultural practices in the county and not necessarily tied to a prerequisite of having to have manure storage on site. So we can discuss that further when I finish this, if you'd like. Tom, if you wouldn't mind going to line 393, please. So regarding the comments earlier that I made by removal of the definitions of malfunctioning and mismanaged manure storage facilities, again, that would have shown up in parts of this ordinance and was suggested by DATCAP to remove those to be consistent with the administrative code NR 151. And by removing those, this section on line 393, letter D, existing facilities, would be the section that would cover the previous definitions we included for malfunctioning and mismanaged manure storage facilities. So this section by existing facilities really talks about the interpretation of the ordinance for manure storage facilities in existence as of October 1, 2002 that pose an imminent threat to public health or fish and aquatic life or are causing a violation of groundwater standards shall be upgraded, replaced, or abandoned in accordance with this section. Levels of materials in mineral storage facilities may not exceed the margin of safety level. So this section really does capture what the former definitions of malfunctioning and mismanaged mineral storage facilities were intended for.
A quick question for Chase, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Levels of materials in manure storage facilities may not exceed or shall not exceed.
That is true. So I guess that's looking at the wording. I believe this is consistent with NR 151, but I do understand your point. I mean, we don't necessarily want to see exceeding a margin of safety level. So I guess at this point in time, I don't see where that word could not be changed to shall.
It certainly.
It was more of a question too, just to bring up. I'm not saying this is what I absolutely
Sure.
want. I just bring it up because we looked at that in other spots.
As a matter of construction of statutes or regulatory language, ordinance language, may not and shall not would essentially have the same meaning here, but shall is, carries with it a different connotation. So either one would be fine. We can change that easily.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Supervisor Kinnear, to your question, I guess, would be, yes, the operation of a manure storage facility where the levels of waste within that facility shall not, or may not be above the margin of safety level. And a margin of safety level, or also known as maximum operating level, those terms are used interchangeably within standards, would be that it's also known as freeboard. So allowing or creating a mark on the manure storage facility itself, so that would be the safety operation and allow for precipitation events to still occur without the structure overtopping.
Chase, since we're discussing this, so last month you reviewed the work the department was doing in arranging for the correction of a real problematic manure storage unit that was clearly potentially threatening a nearby water stream. Would this section have given you any? Is this section relate to how you would have worked with that facility, or is that different than this?
I think it does. Yes. Thank you for the question. And that example was in our minds as we continue to review this. And the current ordinance that's on the books has the definitions for malfunctioning and mismanaged. And this particular structure that you're referring to does fall within those classifications as well, definitions. However, this definition or this section of the ordinance under existing facilities, I think also helps us address this particular situation. So by posing an imminent threat to public health or fish and aquatic life, or causing a violation of groundwater standards, we're not necessarily able to identify groundwater quality standard exceedances on this particular site. It doesn't mean that we couldn't establish that on future sites, but also just due to the fact that the structure itself is in disrepair and is threatening, particularly in this case would be fish and aquatic life, public health also to some extent. I feel like this section of the ordinance would give us that ability to still address and assist us in addressing structures that are of this nature. So.
Okay.
I guess the next would be just jump down to line 451, please, Tom. Here, there's going to be several instances that I mentioned before about just cleaning up some of the language for stating manure storage facility permit rather than animal waste storage facility. So it's consistent with our definitions in the ordinance. Lines 458 and through 463. We added the letter B on 463, activities not related to manure storage facilities. So this is looking at exceptions that to a permit requirement. So in general, this ordinance does apply to all of agriculture. However, permit requirements are still tied to the construction or repair or closure of a manure storage facility itself. So these exceptions would be for permits that are for emergency purposes. So on line 458, if there's a leaking pipe, we're not going to require someone to get a permit before they repair a leaking pipe. And then on line 463, activities not related to manure storage facilities. So a permit is not required for the, let's say for the performance standard to have a nutrient management plan. We're not going to require a permit to get a nutrient management plan. Permitting would be tied strictly to structural things such as manure storage facilities. Line 496, please. So on line 496, it's letter B. It states a recoverable benchmark or benchmarks, including elevations expressed in feet and hundredths. This previously said feet and tenths. The majority of the work that we're doing and the standards that are associated with manure storage facilities do go to the hundredth. So we would like that level of detail as part of manure storage construction plan requirements. Helps provide a little bit more precise information, especially when we're looking at evaluation of potential resource concerns. Tom, if you then jump to line 556. So under this section, line 550, or excuse me, line 556, section B, really talks about the permitting process and the timeframes that are required for review and information submitted to our division. We did do some editing on this section as a result of review with staff. Our current ordinance that is in place right now that we are operating under allows for 90 days for staff to review and issue a permit. This section would allow for a little bit more than that when you really add up the days. But basically what it's saying is that our division shall receive and review all permit applications, and within 30 days of receiving a permit application, we should notify that applicant whether the application is complete. If that application, which in many instances is not complete when we first receive it, we do not really have a timeline that starts for our review until we receive a complete application. So once we receive that, and we'll need to provide that in writing to the applicant of the information that's missing. Once we do get that information, we have 14 days from that time frame to determine that it is indeed complete. Upon that time frame, then we have 60 days from that additional information to either approve or disapprove the application. There is this next sentence was added to this section as well that provides, allows, for an expectation of an applicant, so that not that we operate in this fashion, but if there is an instance where an applicant hasn't heard from us or there has been a delay in the review. So for instance, if the applicant receives no response within 60 days of a complete application determination, the application will be considered approved and the applicant may proceed as if a permit had been issued. So this puts This puts some emphasis on our work to make sure that we stay on task and keep this process moving forward. And experiences in the past with applicants not knowing, particularly as it relates to some DNR actions, not knowing when to expect a response. A lot of those policies have been changed over the years to ensure that there is an expectation for that applicant when a decision would be made. Next would be under fees, be line 586 is where that section starts. Here we, on line 587, section parent 1 there, discussed this previously said fees required by this subchapter shall be established and modified by the PR&D committee. And it's my understanding that this ordinance is particularly related to the Land Conservation Committee, which is consistent with state statute 92 and requiring Land Conservation Committee within a county. So the language was changed to Land Conservation Committee. Also, within this section, the previous document had a table of fees, associated fees for permit fee, as well as an after the fact permit fee and a closure documentation. That table has been removed. The intent here would be to have a separate fee schedule outside of the ordinance that we, my division, we can review that with the Land Conservation Committee as needed to update fees as associated with our work, and not have to open an ordinance in order to provide that revision to the fees. And let's see, as far as the last thing, that's pretty much the bulk of the changes as to the last time you saw this ordinance. One thing that I'll just end with here before I take your questions would be the intent of this ordinance, as you know, but I just want to give a brief review here, is that we are incorporating the ag performance standards and prohibitions that are established through NR 151 State Administrative Code. We have an ordinance currently on the books that was adopted in the year 2000, and it does need updating, which is why you have begun this process many months ago. Part of the adoption of the ag performance standards does not necessarily provide more authority or differences in authority than what we currently have through the implementation of NR 151. Our division in the county here, we currently implement those ag performance standards and prohibitions. We are required to offer cost share as a part of the state requirements. This ordinance does require that offer of cost share prior to enforcement. However, the main difference here would be that this ordinance is in effect within the county that it provides for more timely and more certain follow-up versus relying on partner agencies at the state level to have the capacity to assist us in implementation or enforcement. Now, we're not intending to put badges on our shirts and go out and treat this as if we're going to be issuing violations and citations. This ordinance does allow for the issuance of a citation. Our intention is still to follow the ordinance, work with individuals that are cooperative. However, the offer of cost share can be made. If that offer of cost share is refused and we still have issues or compliance with the ordinance, we do have that ability at our discretion or at our disposal to utilize a citation and any other, stop work orders and that type of enforcement to be certain that we're achieving the goals of the ordinance. So I guess in summary, the ordinance itself is consistent with state administrative code. However, it does provide for, if needed, the legal enforcement here at the county level versus reliance on state agencies for that enforcement. So with that, I'll take any of your questions or discussion. And like I said, the intention would then be to bring this before you again for a public hearing on May 11th.
Any questions, comments? Chase,
Couple
just
questions.
Very well thought out. Very well thought out, Mr. Cummings.
Gary, you had a question, I think.
Are there any standards in this ordinance that are more stringent than state standards?
No, there is not. That there were several public comments that I guess at the previous public hearing that I reviewed that wanted or at least called out for more restrictive standards. And at this current time, the authorities that this ordinance is being adopted under would not allow for more stringent standards than that of the state. There is that ability to do that. However, that is not how this ordinance is being adopted. As an example, there are other portions of Chapter 92 state statutes that would allow for more stringent standards than that of the state. However, those typically would require site-specific data, as well as potentially a requirement for a referendum at the county level or at the municipality level to adopt such more stringent standards. So at this time, no, this ordinance is not more restrictive than that of what is granted to us at the county for our authority through the standards that the statutes that are applicable.
So one more comment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I've always been against like citation authority. So what would happen if I had somebody come from the county come out for a problem on my farm and I didn't agree with what they wanted to do to correct the problem? I had some different views and they would say, well, either do it our way or we'll give you a citation. Why would I want anybody in the county to come out in the first place?
That's a very good point, and one that we've considered a lot in our I guess, interpretation and intention behind the ordinance. I think I'm hoping that you would agree that past practice for conservation work, not only here in Dunn County, but across the state, has always been as a partnership with landowners. It is our intention that we will work with landowners to the extent possible to achieve compliance with NR 151, which is already required within the state of Wisconsin. If there are compliance measures and there are corrective actions that we present to a landowner and that landowner does not agree, we are in a position to, it is our intention to work with that landowner to resolve that matter and come to a reasonable solution for a corrective action. With that said, there are at times instances where there is a refusal by a landowner to adopt any corrective actions. And at that time, it would be evaluated whether or not pursuit of enforcement would be necessary. I think you'll find, and I'm hoping to, I guess, prove this to all of you with my short time here, but in the long run that our cooperation with landowners of Dunn County is going to be first and foremost. However, we do recognize that on a level of accountability, not only on our part, but for the natural resource as well as other members of the community, we do need to have the ability to seek enforcement if necessary. That is currently being done in multiple areas within Dunn County right now. However, it's being enforced through Department of Natural Resources. So this ordinance really doesn't change that a whole lot other than allows us for that ability for enforcement. And like I said, I think that is going to be a method of last resort and not intended by our division to go out and create conflict or issue citations because we have that authority. It would be our last resort mechanism.
And if I might, the citation mechanism for enforcement of ordinances is really designed to be efficient and cost effective too. Without citation authority, the next step where a line is drawn in the sand is the Corporation Council has to file a civil lawsuit against the party who's, violating the ordinance. It's, that involves drafting pleadings, a filing fee of, I think it's like $200 now, and court hearings and all of that. And I mean, that could be the result of a citation too, if someone just ignores it. But citation's not meant, and I think the language of this ordinance spells that out. Citation authority isn't meant to be, used by just driving around and popping citations in people's mailboxes. It's meant to be a mechanism for enforcing the ordinance where people just don't want to follow it. And so it really is it's in a very real sense, it's very similar to just filing an enforcement action, except it doesn't cost nearly as much money to start that way. It doesn't cost the county as much money to get the wheels of litigation going. And because citation usually liquidates the amount of the violation of the forfeiture to some great degree. Just, if you end up in court, every day that a violation exists is a violation, an individual separate violation. Many, many years ago, I filed an action in a zoning enforcement action. And I think it was like $7,000-8,000, the potential forfeiture that the landowner faced because he wouldn't comply with the requests of the surveying and zoning office for placement of his building within a lot. Citations never get that high. They're usually set at a certain amount, $200, $250, something like that. So it's meant to be a mechanism of almost last resort. It's not a I think it's greatly misconceived that it's a sort of a free-for-all, that all of a sudden a flurry of citations that are going to be flying through the mail or dropped off at people's houses.
One more comment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I remember asking Chase's predecessor of how many times a year that like a citation ordinance would be in effect. He said like maybe one. And my other question, and that's not really showing a great need for a citation ordinance. And then if the standards are not being met, they're also not being met by the state, and the state would be the one that would do going to court. Is that right?
Yeah, so right now, I guess since I've started, I've been approached by DNR to, they reviewed with me, I think there's 5 potential scenarios out there right now, or individuals that DNR has found to be needing to be addressed as far as compliance with NR 151. And in those instances, DNR has taken the lead on sending letters, making point of contact, and we within the Land and Water Conservation Division have been tasked with working with that individual or those individuals to determine a solution to the compliance issues. In some instances, one I can think of in particular that has gone on for, I think probably 6 years or more, is to a point now where DNR is gathering their information for stepped enforcement, potentially through Department of Justice. And that is needing to take place because of repeated attempts to achieve compliance without any results. With this ordinance, and to Corporation Counsel Nick's point, would provide an opportunity for us to not drag some of these instances out so long. They are extremely time consuming. They're extremely, I guess, uncertain for the landowner themselves. And I think while this ordinance does not deviate from state rules in any way, it does, however, provide an opportunity for us to seek a remedy sooner rather than consuming a number of different resources, not only locally, but on the statewide basis for achievement. And I understand the point of allowing DNR for enforcement, but in many cases, that takes many years, if at all, and it doesn't necessarily achieve compliance on some of these sites that we need. And these are sites that I'm talking about that are direct discharges in most cases of some sort of agricultural waste, particularly manure in some cases, directly to surface water or some other threat. So they are ones that need to be cleaned up, and if they're allowed to persist for that amount of time, I'm not sure what we're achieving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one clarification, Chase, back on line 332, where you substituted nutrients for manure. Could you explain that a little bit more? Why we're doing that? So now we're talking about fertilizer applications potentially too.
Sure.
And does that mean that if they are in excess of significantly in excess of the what's called for in the nutrient management plan, that can be addressed, or is it's a sensitive area? I mean, why are nutrients being defined that way?
Sure, very good question. Thank you. So this portion falls under section 10.09 performance standards and prohibitions, and it is consistent with the ag performance standards and prohibitions in NR 151. And part of that requires the implementation and use of a nutrient management plan. This particular section on line 332, section H, defines the requirement that a nutrient management plan shall be submitted to our division to ensure that all nutrients within the county are applied following a nutrient management plan. So the intent would be not to tease out just manure. The requirement for a 590 nutrient management plan is applicable in the state of Wisconsin right now for all sources of nutrients, whether they're applied to cropland or pasture land. And therefore, the edits to this section would be consistent with that requirement. So to your question and point of a commercial fertilizer, the requirement to have a nutrient management plan for commercial fertilizer in the state of Wisconsin is currently required. Many of our clients or landowners that we work with still don't realize that. They feel like a nutrient management plan is just for manure. And if I don't have manure, then I don't have to do nutrient management. And that is not the case. And this particular section would help require that as part of the performance standard, that all nutrients applied to cropland or pasture land must be accounted for in a nutrient management plan and must be then submitted to our division by April 1st in order to ensure that we have proper coverage of nutrient management in the county. And should an operator or a landowner not submit a nutrient management plan, this ordinance would allow for our follow-up with that, obviously requiring the offer of cost share and the standard practices for implementation that are consistent with 151. So it would just call out that emphasis that it is all nutrients.
Thank you. That's very helpful. It seems like it's also consistent with the technical standard revisions that you talked about last month have this element in there. Any other questions? Okay. So we'll bring this to public hearing in May. And surprisingly, we're at the end of our agenda. Oh, wonderful surprise. And we have a beautiful day to go outside and enjoy. Any announcements anyone has?
I would like to just make a very quick announcement, just so the committee is aware, we did receive a major subdivision plat was submitted to the county. It's right now proposed development of 10 lots in the town of Elk Mound that we are currently reviewing. It's very similar in nature to the Elysian Fields plat you may remember from a year and a half ago in the town of Elk Mound. So we are reviewing that. That will be coming before the committee at some point. And again, that would be subject to our current ordinance. This may be the last major development subject to our old ordinance. So I just wanted to make the committee aware of that. You will be seeing that at some point. Our review is not complete at this point, but I would say probably in the next month or so, that'll be coming before this committee. So just wanted to get that out there.
Thanks, Tom. Anybody else? Okay, then